We're very honored this weekend here in Toronto, along with that of Israel congregation, to be hosting Rabbi Paul Plotkin, Rabbi Emeritus of Temple Beth of Margate, Florida. Rabbi Plotkin is from Toronto. He grew up in Bathurst Manor and was an active pulpit rabbi for over 40 years, serving Beth for 33 of those 40 years. When I was in rabbinical school, I had the opportunity to shadow Rabbi Plotkin at Temple Beth and I can tell you that he wasn't just an active rabbi, but also a beloved and respected rabbi by his entire congregation. He is past president of the Rabbinical Assembly in the Southeast region, and for almost a quarter of a century served on the Rabbinical Assembly's Committee of Jewish Law and Standards. He is the founding chairman of its Kashrut subcommittee and is the Rav HaMachshir. That means he's in charge of Kashrut for the famous Ben's Kosher Deli restaurant chain. And Bob got me several years ago a Ben's Kosher Deli yarmulke that I looked for all week and couldn't find, but I highly recommend Ben's Kosher Delicatessen. And 38th and Broadway? Not anymore. Just Boca and Long Island. Boca and Long Island. And his latest book is called Wisdom Grows in My Garden. And if you would like a copy of the book, if you'd like to purchase a copy, speak to me after shul, and I can help arrange it after Shabbat. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Plotkin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. That was a very lovely introduction. I wish my mother was still alive because she would have believed it. I'm really, first of all, I want to thank Rabbi Grover for inviting me. This is a big thrill. I'm doing a lot of traveling around the country, actually around North America, in support of the book, and I'll talk later about what we'll do tomorrow. But it's just such a pleasure to come here. I have a connection which I want to share with you about the shul, and I didn't know that I would have other connections. So, for example, your ritual director and I were in the same class and associated 1,000 years ago. I'm impressed that your chazan looks like he could have tried out for the Raptors. And I've had a really good time learning about your associate rabbi. And she doesn't come all that far in her place of birth from where my dad was born in Siberia. But that's not my connection. My connection is somewhere when I was at York University around 1970, Rabbi Vayera Zichrono Livracha asked me if I would teach a Judaica high school class here at the shul. And I don't remember a lot, but I remember that I was never here. There were houses on the property, right? And so my classes that I taught were in a room in a house. I never made it into the building. So I want to, again, thank Rabbi Grover, because finally, after a gazillion years, I made it to the big room. So today we read about the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. It is, if you look at it, a really torturous story about a father's faith in God being put to the test. Under intense stress, Abraham is ordered to offer up his long-awaited, his only son from Sarah, as an offering to God. Abraham's faith holds up to the end, and he is rewarded, but that's not my concern today. I have a really weird question to explore. What would have happened if the story ended a little bit different? What if a ram never appeared? What if Abraham went through with the Akedah, with the sacrifice, and killed his son? What would have happened to Abraham's faith if God had not called it off? So there's this lovely little show. You all get PBS Masterpiece, right? Theater here. There's a lovely show called Grantchester. Just out of curiosity, how many people watch Grantchester? Okay, that's why it's on PBS. Well, let me tell you a little bit about it. It's about a small-town British vicar in the late 1950s who befriends the chief detective of the town and helps him solve the inevitable murder of the week. After 8 seasons, with a 9th renewed, one wonders how it is that a small town like Grantchester, like so many of the other small English towns in British mysteries, can have so many murders. But that's a question for another time. What makes the show so successful is that the beloved characters on the show are people you just attach to. There's a woman called Mrs. C. She takes care of the vicarage. She cooks the meals for the clergy. And until season 7, she was a highly committed religious zealot who believed deeply in God and acted in what she thought was a good Christian way. She wasn't particularly tolerant of anyone who strayed off the proper path. She had a hard time when she found out the assistant priest was a homosexual. Though once the second vicar could no longer keep his homosexuality a secret, after her initial knee-jerk reaction of condemnation, she came to see his struggle. She evolved to see his goodness, his kindness, and his pain. She became tolerant and then supportive of him, even when he was ultimately forced to leave the clergy by his superiors in the church. And then something happened. Something changed. She was secretive, constantly angry at everyone. If her husband or friend said anything to her, she was likely to have their head shoot off. And that's when we discover that she had been diagnosed with a dangerous cancer. She kept it to herself, except for long dialogues that she had with God. God would surely spare such a devout woman. When he didn't, she became angry at God. She didn't believe in God anymore. She was now officially a disbeliever. Now, later in the show, she decides to take a chance on a dangerous and difficult surgery, mostly to keep her husband and the vicar quiet. At the same time, the vicar, who's the star of the show, was shot, rushed to the hospital, and his life was up for grabs. She was aware of his condition, and again she expressed her anger at God, the God that she no longer believed in, but she was angry at him. At the end of the episode, she woke up from surgery, not sure where she was, surrounded by all the people that loved her the most, and her first question was rather surprising. She asked, "Is this heaven?" To which the gay, defrocked vicar's partner said, "I doubt it. We probably wouldn't be in that heaven." In the next scene, we see Mrs. C sitting by the hospital bed of the dying vicar who opens his eyes, and now we know he will live and the show will have another season. Mrs. C, after being saved, after seeing the vicar survive, now understands that she was wrong, that indeed God is wonderful. He saved 2 of them from what appeared to be a certain death. Okay, that's the background. So allow me to state for you the theology of Mrs. C. It goes something like this. I believe in God with all my heart. I follow all his rules rather aggressively and judgmentally, as long as my life is protected. When I'm vulnerable and I pray, I expect him to answer me. And if and when he doesn't, I no longer believe in him. It's sort of like heads, I win, tails, you lose. To me, little American politics, it's like a Trumpian view of elections. If I lose, it's a rigged election. My 40-plus years of experience tell me that she is not alone in this outlook. We all assume goodness and God's protection. And if it's absent, and we're willing to live the right way, and we're called out to Him, and we call out to Him, and still we are unprotected from the wrath of nature or the evil of criminals or the failing of our body, then it had to have been just a charade. What good is God if He doesn't answer the pleas of prayers, especially from His most devoted people? You weren't there for me, God, so now, God, you're dead to me. Not surprisingly, in the post-Holocaust era, Rabbi Richard Rubinstein wrote a book called After Auschwitz. He was the leading thinker in the God is dead movement. He argued that Judaism had a lot to teach and to guide us, but a belief in an all-powerful, omnipotent God was no longer possible. For many people, especially Holocaust survivors and many other Jews, this was a door opening to atheism, and that belief has spread greatly in the years since. I was born 5 years after the Holocaust. I grew up in a community in Bathurst Manor where there were a tremendous amount of survivors. Most of my friends of my age, their first language born here was Yiddish. The fact that some of them were atheists never surprised me. It was those who were devout and practicing who came en masse to shul, but especially at Yizkor. Those were the ones I could never figure out. It's not surprising that there are many Jews who have difficulty with their belief in God, including me. We recoil from the horrors that occur in the world, from the acts of violence. When I first wrote this, I had to add now another phrase, from the Hamas pogrom, from tragedies caused by nature, earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis. We wonder, where is this God that we believe in? Well, there's a new phenomenon in Judaism, possibly you've never heard of it, that attempts to deal with the issue. I don't know how widespread it is, but it's something that intrigued me when I came across it. It's called fictionalism. As the editor of the Jewish Week called it, religion for non-believers. The New York Times did a story on Professor Scott Hershowitz, who defines it as pretending to follow a set of beliefs to reap the benefits of a set of actions. He fasts on Yom Kippur. He observes Passover because he says, it's just what we do as Jews. It keeps me connected to the community that I value. His long professorial view is that when it feels like the world is falling apart, I seek refuge in religious rituals. Not because I believe my prayers are answered. The prayers we say in synagogue remind me that evil has always been with us, but that people persevere, people survive, people can even thrive. I take my kids to synagogue so they'll feel connected to that tradition, so that they know that the world has been falling apart from the start and that there's beauty in trying to put it back together again. A few years ago in Commentary magazine, there was an attorney in New York, Jay Lefkowitz, described himself as, quote, a social Orthodox Jew. That is, a Jew who practices orthodoxy, but isn't really sure how God fits into his life. He writes, I certainly wasn't sure if Jewish law was divine or simply the result of 2 millennia of rabbinical interpretations. So for me, I imagine even for many others, the key to Jewish living is not our religious beliefs, but our commitment to a set of practices, values that foster community and continuity. So now I'll put it into simple language. To sum it all, God does not exist, but I love and observe Judaism because it feels good. It gives me a pathway to life that is warm and rewarding, and it's something that Jews do, so I do it. When I first read it, I thought what he was really saying was, I don't really believe in God. I come to shul for the chillant, for the single malt, and for my buddies. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are like that. Now, this works for him, but does it work for you? It doesn't work for me. Can you come to shul today and encourage your kids and grandkids to come as well if you don't really believe in God? How can you pray to a God that you believe doesn't exist? How many people do you know would willingly give up lobster and BLTs and, of course, the great lusted after the cheeseburger, to follow the rules of a God that doesn't exist. I don't think this is a solution for the masses. So let me try to express a couple of different approaches that might work. How about the possibility that God is there for each of us, if only we're open to seeing it? There's a man had a dream. He was walking along the beach. He was walking with God along the beach. Across the sky flashed all the scenes of his life. For each scene, he noticed there were two sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to him and one to God. But when the last scene flashed before him, he looked more closely at the footprints, and he noticed that many times along the path, there was only one set of footprints in the sand. He also noticed that happened during the lowest and saddest times of his life. That really bothered him. He questioned God. He asked, "Lord, you said that once I decided to follow you, you would walk all the way with me. But I noticed that during the most troublesome times of my life, there was only one set of footprints. I don't understand why. When I needed you the most, you deserted me." And God replied, "My precious, precious child, I love you. I would never leave you. During the times of trial and suffering, when you see only one set of footprints, it's because then I was carrying you." This is an approach that says that God is always around, that we have a relationship with Him, but we're not always aware of that presence. When we feel that God is missing and we get angry, it's our failing, not God's failing, that's at fault, that shuts us off from the very God that we crave. We all want there to be a God. We all want to have a relationship with God. Life's easier to navigate if we're not alone, if we have a lover, a friend, a companion, a partner. We want a relationship with God so that we're not alone and that we have a navigator with us. Most of us don't feel it, but maybe it's because we've always had it and didn't realize that it was there. A boy's mother called the Make-A-Wish Foundation. It grants last wishes to dying children. Her son had always wanted to be a fireman. So arrangements were made for him to leave the hospital for a day visit to the city fire station. The anticipation alone was enough to rally the sick boy. The firefighters took him on a ride through the city streets on the hook and ladder truck. The sirens were blaring. His body was limp, but his face shone brightly. After the ride, they had a special ceremony for the boy at the firehouse. They gave him a fireman's hat, a jacket, the battalion insignia, and his name was embroidered over the pocket. Every firefighter shook his hand, welcomed him as their newest member. It was the happiest day of his young life. The boy returned to the hospital, only to take a final turn for the worse. He was gasping with irregular breathing, intermittent consciousness. Knowing that the end was near, the family asked if it was possible for the hospital to waive the rule they had that you could only have 2 visitors at a time. The firemen wanted to come and say goodbye. The hospital agreed. When the family asked the firemen if they could come to say goodbye, the firemen said, "We'll do better than that. Unlatch the windows to his room. Tell the hospital to inform the patients. And don't be alarmed by the sirens. It's just the fire department coming to pay respect to one of their own." Within minutes, everyone heard the approaching hook and ladder, the sirens. Raised by the sound, the boy awakened, saw the firefighters climbing through the hospital window. One of the firemen picked the emaciated boy up and cradled him in his arm. The boy smiled weakly and whispered, "Does this mean that I'm really a fireman?" And the fireman responded, "You always were." Maybe that's the approach to take with God, with our relationship. We've always wanted to have that relationship. We feel like it's missing, but it's always been there. We just couldn't see it. But maybe I am doing a disservice. Maybe I'm overcomplicating what this is all about. Rav Nachman of Breslov taught that all aspects of religion and life, we have to make them more simple. We overcomplicate everything. We're so sophisticated, we make ourselves neurotic. Maybe simplicity is what's called for. So let me maybe try one last time to make this whole question of God into something so simple that we can all relate and use it in our life. What do we know about our obligation to God? It's to love God with all our hearts, with all our soul, and with all our might. What's missing in that obligation? There are no conditions. Loving God is pure, non-conditional, non-transactional as a relationship. I just love God, and I'm lucky to have God, I have a God to love. Anything else may or may not happen, but that's not what love is about. And I'll make it real, and it's kind of fun for me because I'm in Toronto. When I was 17, I was very active in USY. There was a girl in USY that I was crazy about. I don't know if she ever knew how much I felt for her. I think she didn't. When I saw her or interacted with her, I had this amazing feeling. I was just happy to be in her orbit. Call it puppy love or attraction, I don't know. But it was never reciprocated. My heart fluttered just to be in her space. Did I have hopes and dreams for more? I sure did. But the fact that it never happened never lessened what I felt for her. It was all one way, and yet I preferred that to not having her in my life at all. So why am I sharing this with you? Because to me, God is like that girl. Do I hope for more? Absolutely. I want him to appear. I want him to save me in a crisis. I want everything while he's here. But do I reject God and the feelings that I have because I get no more? No. Because the act of being able to love is something that I control. It makes me feel something. That feeling doesn't go away just because it never gets to be anymore. So I don't get angry and lash back. I'm lucky to have God in my life. Anything more would be great. But God doesn't stop being a passion of mine because passion is what I bring to the relationship. I'm the one in need. And just knowing that God is in my life is something special for me. In my adult life, the role of that USY girl is played by God. I may ask questions. I may want more. I may want more than I'll get. I may be disappointed. But in the end, just having God in my life is important. And that is what the Torah understands when it defines what I'm supposed to do about this complicated relationship. Make it simple. Shema Yisrael, Shem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God. The Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. I pray that you can all find that kind of love. Amen. So thank you all for listening. 2 commercials, because the show was on PBS, but I work for network TV. There's commercials. So I have 2 quick things to say. One is that after a lovely kiddush lunch, you're all invited to stay for a lecture that I want to share with you. It has it's the history of the evolution of kosher supervision in the United States and in Canada, specifically in Toronto. And there's some amazing parallels and some interesting stories. And then I want to compare and contrast Orthodox supervision, COR in this case, with conservative kashrut, and we'll see where it all goes at the end. That'll be at the end of after Kiddush today. Tomorrow, there's a breakfast at Adith Israel that I hope many of you will be able to make. Then I'm going to talk to you entirely different track. I'm going to talk to you about a very special book that that came out in April. It's called Wisdom Grows in My Garden. Somebody asked me yesterday if that was metaphoric. I said it is absolutely not metaphoric. It is about many, many years of vegetable gardening. The opening of the book takes place in Jackson's Point when I'm 2 years old, and continues from there into Florida, my gardening, but mostly it's got a lot of humor in it, But mostly, it's got 25 life lessons that will guide people of all ages to have a better, more fulfilling life. So that's tomorrow. I'll be able to sign the books and so on at Israel, and I look forward to many of you being there. Shabbat Shalom.